Viewers, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has turned 75 today. Over the last 25 years, he's emerged as India's most influential and arguably its most credible political brand. For years altogether, these plaudits were showered upon India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. But it will be difficult to deny that Modi's time in office, especially as Prime Minister, has been just as consequential in shaping India, that is Bharat. In any event, the comparisons are now being drawn willy-nilly. Supporters see him as the restorer of civilizational pride and Sanatana agency. Critics accuse him of diluting so-called Nehruvian liberalism. But there's unanimity over brand Modi's undeniable connect. Modi's won India's mandate at a time when its democracy has matured to provide voters several viable options, and most importantly, the freedom to exercise their franchise without fear. To have done so thrice, to have won the mandate thrice, is therefore a testament to the credibility that brand Modi enjoys among Indians. On occasions such as these, viewers, the tendency is to speak in hyperboles. But we are going to shun that temptation and engage this evening to seek honest answers on questions over Prime Minister Modi's leadership style, his mission and his legacy. It would have been easy for me tonight, viewers, to sit 3 or 4 top ministers and have them sing praises undiluted of the Prime Minister, but we're not doing that. Instead, we're going to go and speak to observers, analysts, researchers, academics, and get an idea of Prime Minister Modi's legacy, where he stands among prime ministers, and what his vision is, and how durable and enduring is it actually going to be. So let's open this up. And I want to begin first with Suhail Seth, who has written a piece recently for Open Magazine, the influential Open Magazine, in which he makes a very interesting point. He says that one of the reasons why he's attracted to Prime Minister Modi's leadership style is because he has inspired India to think big. Now, what does that mean, Mr. Suhail Seth? What do you mean when you say that? And why does his brand appeal endure?
So, Rahul, any leadership brand is built on 4 pillars: empathy, insight, delivery, and inspiration. On these 4 pillars, Modi ticks all the boxes. And the reason why I said in my article, and I've said this multiple times, that Narendra Modi is a compelling brand because he has allowed for 3 things to happen. One is India to aspire in a unique manner. Number 2, he has delivered on what he has promised. And number 3, which is very critical, and Amish is on your program, he worked at the Nehru Center. The pride of being Indian and of Indian origin never existed to that extent until 2014. Narendra Modi has changed all that. And it's not about arrogance, it's not about jingoism, it's about pride of origin. It's about the fact that you don't have to be apologetic anymore about being Indian. And consequently, parallelly, what are the 4 things that, to my mind, which have been truly amazing? One is Swachh Bharat. Everyone laughed. Why should the Prime Minister talk about hygiene? That is the most critical. It is critical as far as civic planning is concerned. It is critical as far as living with dignity is concerned. The second, Make in India. He moved India from a labor arbitrage economy to an economy that was willing to manufacture, innovate, manufacture. Number 3, he allowed for businesses to dream big. More Indian brands have gone global in the last 11 years than they had in the 60 years prior to that. And number 4, every young Indian today dreams of being an entrepreneur. That is the difference, Rahul. We were once defined as a nation of shopkeepers. Today we are defined as a nation of doers. The difference is that you've had a leader who's allowed you to dream, created an ecosystem where that dream can transform and be realized by people, no matter what class they are. And in addition to all of that, and again, Amish can bear me out and Anand can, He's allowed for India's civilizational legacy to be reborn. That was
Conversation. We're joined also by Salvatore Babonis, who's written a book recently called Dharma Democracy that I am presently reading. It's very, very insightful. There is an interesting question that swirls around the Prime Minister. And that is that some people believe that Prime Minister Modi, while nurturing India's democratic traditions, has not done full justice to them. So I want to ask you, has Modi nurtured India's democratic traditions, and does India's democracy under him remain representative?
Narendra Modi is the first child of independent India to become prime minister and the first truly post-colonial prime minister of India. And as such, he set a different tone from the prime ministers who preceded him, who, one way or another, were all really children of British colonialism. They may have fought for freedom from Britain, but nonetheless, they were part of the system that was the colonial system before independence. So Prime Minister Modi has brought a different tone to Indian politics, a more demotic tone, one more in tune with ordinary voters in India instead of in tune with international politesse, of a colonial mindset and a colonial vocabulary. Obviously, he made the transition from primarily speaking in English to primarily speaking in Hindi, which, let's remember, is not his first language. It is a language he learned to become a successful politician in India. Now, that, of course, comes with the risk of social isolation on the international stage, that people view him as somehow different, as somehow not one of us in the Western world. And that's precisely because he's not one of us. He's one of you. He is a true Indian. Now, that will raise questions about India's direction in the West, but I think Indians can be very secure in their knowledge that the fundamental aspect of a democracy is that its leaders represent its people, not the aspirations of international commentators like me, but the aspirations of ordinary Indians like you.
On the point of nurturing democracy, because that's the fundamental question, that people sort of have divergent views on Modi. What do you make of this huge talk that democracy, and most of these questions are raised by India's opposition, in all fairness. I'm not going to accuse the foreign media, etc. They probably pick up on what the opposition says, and unfiltered, they sort of put it out there. That's for them to take a call on. But the fact is that many people say that India's democratic traditions under Mr. Modi have not been as representative as they, for example, were under Prime Minister Nehru.
Well, certainly if you want to compare Modi and Nehru, there's no contest. Nehru's first action as prime minister was to change the Indian constitution to limit freedom of speech and limit of the freedom of the press. So there's really no sense in which Narendra Modi is a Nehruvian leader. I would say he's a much more democratic leader than Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, Nehru had other positive qualities. He brought the nation together. He kept India unified through the independence process. But being a democratic man of the people is certainly not something you would accuse Nehru of being. Now, under Modi's India, India's institutions are near identical to the Indian institutions he inherited in 2014. There's been no serious change in institutions. All of the tinkering has been around the edges, and that tinkering has largely made India more democratic and more responsive to its voters. That doesn't mean that it's resulted in outcomes that political scientists would prefer, but being responsive to the voters is ultimately what democracy is all about.
Dr. Ranganathan, let me open this up to you. Would it be fair to say that brand Modi is not as consequential, if not as consequential, then perhaps more consequential than brand Nehru today, for the reasons that I outlined in my introduction?
Good evening, Rahul, and good evening to my fellow panelists. First, let me heartily congratulate Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his 75th birthday. I can already see it's a wonderful discussion, and it's a departure from what others are discussing. They're discussing things, complete successes. Here, you've delved into something that you believe away from bombast. So let me contribute to that. Given the fact that today is a day where I don't wish anything from him, I want to wish him. So I'm in a bit of a difficult situation because I have, as you know, a huge laundry list of what I wish from him. A lot of things that he hasn't delivered. Being a politician, obviously, that comes with the territory. But I suppose I can skim through them and come to what he has delivered, because I think today that's more important. But, when Salvatore has talked about he's important for us because he is delivering our aspirations. I didn't want to be patronizing, but our aspirations are same, if not more, than the aspirations of a successful, healthier, wealthier, wiser Westerner, more freer. So there should not be any less. So one shouldn't be patronizing that our rules or our rights are in any way should be lesser so that the delivery would be faster or easier. No. For example, if you look at freedom of speech, now it's one thing to say, well, India is free, but is it freer than a Western country, Nordic country? The answer is no. Would we want that? Yes. So India is as free as it was in terms of freedom of speech or democracy as the Congress, gave it to Narendra Modi. That's true. But does that speak a lot about how much freedom do we have? That is the question, and that is where aspirations come in. When you talk about, privatization, when you talk about farm laws, when you talk of the progress that we want at the speed that we want, as I said, it's a long wish list, laundry list of, for example, Hindus being actively discriminated in this country. And you just saw one example yesterday, a symbolic example at that. But there are constitutional discriminations. Nothing's happened there. But let me not talk about that today. Today is the time to wish him. And if you think about what Modi has done in the last 10, 11 years, then undoubtedly he has made Indians healthier, wealthier, wiser, and more safer and more secure. It is undoubtedly a more confident India. Just give you 3 examples of that. When the West tells us do not buy oil from Russia or we will slap sanctions as they did, we increase our import of oil from Russia. When the West tells us don't do this, we do whatever is in our interest. We put the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. We bomb the hell out of mainland Pakistan. So for a change, for in decades, we are not worried about what the West thinks of us. And as far as internally we are concerned, yes, Sohail is absolutely right that building 100 million toilets gives you dignity. But Sohail, more than that, please realize that every new toilet built saves that household upwards of 50,000 rupees in health benefits. Every new Ayushman card that has been distributed by Modi in the last 7 years, 370 million of them, has slashed the out-of-pocket expenditure that was the fastest descent into poverty by an Indian by 27%. Every new tap water connection, and there are 120 million of them, has slashed under 5 diarrheal deaths by half. Every new Ujjwala connection, there are 100 million of them, is directly saving 150,000 lives because household pollution is the biggest contributor to child mortality. These are tangible things that Modi has done that has made us wealthier, healthier, and wiser. So today, I wish him all the best. It is not the time to discuss my laundry list of wishes that are unfulfilled.
Okay, well, of course, there are aspirations, and the Prime Minister is the first to say that he has a lot of work to do, and that's why he's not taking even a break today. Out there, actively inaugurating new projects and trying to sort of make India a better place, more livable country. Let me go across to Amish Tripathi, who hasn't actually had a word in at this moment. Prime Minister Modi says India's strength, Mr. Tripathi, lies in its civilization, not just its economy. These are his words exactly. How do you read this statement? What do you mean by this? What do you interpret?
I think that's a very deep point that the Honorable Prime Minister is making. If you see in the West, and economically, of course, they're still dominant, no doubt about it. Their relative power is declining. But economically, they're still dominant. But is it a balanced society? Is money all that there is to life and to a society? I lived, as you know, in the UK for some 4.5 years. I was there on government service as an Indian government diplomat. And what one finds in the West is communities are breaking down, families are breaking down. There's the basic societal asabya is breaking down. Just money does not create a good society. There are many other things as well, as our ancestors had told us. The four purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Just artha is not good enough. You need artha, don't get me wrong. We had the first few decades of our independent existence where we unnecessarily valorized socialism, which is the most un-Indian of philosophies. We must create wealth, but it's not the only thing in life. There are other things in life as well, as our ancestors told us.
Okay, that's interesting because I want to press on with you because for decades the conversation about the glory of India's civilizational past has remained muted. And this is a fact. Now, I know Dr. Ranganathan has certain quibbles on this particular point. We could have gone further, is his point. But how exactly has Modi begun to correct the narrative, Mr. Tripathi? And then I want to bring in Suhail Seth and Salvatore Babones once more. Yes. Mr. Tripathi. Yeah.
India has been under foreign occupation, foreign rule, large parts of India for nearly 1,000 years, right? Since the invasions of Mahmud Ghori. First there were Turks, then Persians, Arabs, and then the Europeans. For many centuries, like in North India, you don't find any ancient temples, Buddhist viharas, Jain temples. Most of them, they were all destroyed. Our ancient universities were destroyed. Our way of life was destroyed. It's only in the south that you see many of our ancient temples. You'll find that so many traditions that we in the north do hidden in our homes because that became the tradition over the last few centuries. In the south, they still do it in public, in the temples. And you would have thought that post 1947, when we became free, when we had self-indigenous rule after so many centuries, you thought this would change. You'd think that this would change. Unfortunately, it didn't. And this was perhaps the most heartbreaking of situations because the ones turning away from our culture were our own people, at least some parts of our elite. And I find that changing now. It's wonderful that the Prime Minister is giving voice to our ancient traditions. But I should give credit to all the Indians as well. The masses who kept our culture alive against elite disdain and perhaps even oppression. I mean, it's easier to teach yoga in British schools than it is in Indian schools. How shocking is that?
That is actually a good point. I'll circle back to you, Mr. Tripathi. Yes, Dr. Ranganathan, you're raising your hand. You want to quickly put something in, and I want to bring in Salvatore and Suhail Seth right after. Yes.
No, I mean, of course, all my dear friends on the panel would say, here he goes again. But, as I have already wished Narendra Modi, honestly, from my heart, and I have complimented him on the great things he's done, I think he'll allow me a couple of, veering away from the natural. The fact is that, yes, Hindu civilization has survived. But the way we are going, Hindu civilization will not be destroyed or chiseled at illegally anymore. I think we can be pretty confident of that, what Amish was talking about, the 1,000 years that have happened. My worry is it is going to be destroyed legally. And Narendra Modi is doing nothing about it. In fact, we are going backwards. If you look at all the constitutional laws and the clauses, everything is primed to discriminate against Hindus. And I don't want to go into details, but just one would suffice. The fact that only Hindu-run schools are obligated to give 25% reservations to the economically weaker sections and Muslim and Christian-run schools are not, has led to the fact that tens of thousands of only Hindu-run schools have shut down. As a result, Hindu children are going to potentially be proselytized or converted when they go to schools of other religious denominations. Hindu temples are under control. There are Hindu refugees in India. You have the Waqf Act that has usurped 20 lakh acres in the last 10 years, and whatever the Waqf by user thing that might not be applicable anymore, I'm sorry, it's not applicable retrospectively. So you have thousands, hundreds of thousands of properties that are registered by Waqf by user that will remain so. So it's just so many problems that we have that Hindus are facing culturally.
Well, I'd only say you should leave something for perhaps those who follow the
The
Prime
next thing.
Minister. Maybe
Yes.
maybe Amit Shah or as Mr. Babones believes, and he's dedicated a whole chapter to another promising lodestar, and that is Yogi Adityanath. Who knows? Let's see. But, those are important aspects. Let's not be... Today, as I said, viewers, we're also not going to just sing hosannas. That's not our style. We've got good people to really look at this extremely objectively. So that's important. Now, I want to bring back both Suhail Seth on the question of leadership and Salvatore Babones. Suhail Seth, I find this interesting because critics argue that Prime Minister's leadership style is very plebiscitary and overbearing. Is this a justified criticism, or has this actually allowed for decisions to be taken snappily? And we had the previous government, the UPA, that had parallel governance structures, admitted to, in fact. You had a Prime Minister who was remote controlled and a person who was basically extra constitutional, who was controlled by another lot of people. So you had these layers. Nothing really got done. Yeah, I think you're on mute. Mr. Seth, you're on mute, I think.
When Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister, the lady was in power but not in office. He was in office but not in power, which is what caused all the problems. You need decisive leadership. You need firmness of leadership. Leaders, by definition, are supposed to lead. They're not supposed to be namby-pambies, wishy-washy, succumbing to all kinds of peer pressure, because then there's no leadership. You can't have 20 leaders. You have to have one leader. And that leader sets out the vision because that leader is elected. It's not that Narendra Modi sneaked in through the back door. He's been elected thrice as India's Prime Minister. So for God's sake, the least you can expect from a leader is leadership. Now to blame him for firmness or decision-making or decisiveness is utterly stupid. And let me tell you, I'll say this much to everyone's dismay. Democracy is the weakest form of governance, but the only one that we have. We can't help it. And it's not been said by me. It's been said multiple times. So within the ambit of democracy, within an ecosystem which allows shrill voices, stupid voices, all of those to be raised, you have a situation where Narendra Modi is charting his own course. And he's doing it for the sake of India and for Indians.
Okay, that's put as directly and bluntly as possible. Salvatore Babones, globally, is Modi seen as a civilizational statesman or as a strong man?
Look, I'll say first that I've seen no evidence that freedom of speech in India is in any way compromised, and it seems like to me that it's on a par with a typical European Union country, not as robust as in the United States, but typical for the Western world. Similarly, I think the proposition that Hindu civilization is threatened in India is frankly preposterous. I don't think that has any credibility whatsoever. Now, when it comes to how Narendra Modi is seen overseas, there are lots of allegations that he is some kind of strong man. And I think that is related to the same kinds of allegations that are leveled against Mr. Modi in India. They're fundamentally class-based. Let's just face facts. We all are members of a very different social class from the one from which Narendra Modi originated. His upbringing, childhood, and growth as a human being occurred in very different circumstances from those of journalists and university professors, and in very different circumstances from the typical Australian or American or British journalist. And thus, it's very difficult sometimes for us to see that he may have a stronger connection with ordinary Indian voters than someone who went to a top university and achieved a PhD or a master's in journalism. Now, that can be seen as some kind of quote-unquote strongman, plebiscitary approach to democracy, but I think what it reflects much more is simply being in tune with what people who are fairly typical of their society feel, think, and want. That is, it represents democracy in action.
Not that I'm trying to suggest anything here, but Suhail said, I remember before 2014, people amongst a certain class of Indians were so tired that they were saying that, we wouldn't mind a little bit of a danda raj, the stick, somebody who wields the stick a little bit. Now when some of those people, the same people now are sort of complaining about the fact that they feel that certain freedoms have been proscribed because there is this sort of very decisive form of leadership, bills are passed without consultation, this, that, the other. How do you react to that? Because I was also reading the book that is written by Mr. Babonis, where he's quoted a Pew survey that talks about Indians being inclined towards that sort of trains run on time kind of throwback to a strong man.
The Indians love the danda as long as they don't get it and my neighbor gets it. But then they break all the laws as well. I'm a great believer in danda raj because danda raj shapes you up. Otherwise, we have a problem in this country for every solution. We are whining all the time. People have, glorified the word jugaad. People will take shortcuts. I'm glad that there is a danda because the danda is forcing people to wake up and smell the goddamn coffee. So I'm a great believer. And let me tell you what freedoms have been proscribed. He has not abolished the judiciary yet. So what are we talking about? It's very easy to say, oh, my freedom has been taken away. What freedom? Freedom to cheat? Freedom to rob the country? What freedoms have been taken away?
Doctor? Yeah. As if on cue.
Well, it's strange for me to say this, but the freedoms that have been taken away, the laws that have taken away those freedoms are more than 75 years old. So in that sense, freedoms have not been taken away in the last 10 years. Our constitution has taken away our freedom, starting from the First Amendment itself, but even before that. But the fact remains, do we have as much freedom of speech and expression, as much press freedom as a Nordic country? The answer is no. Do we want that? Now, I want it. So I don't want to be patronizing, saying that, oh, Indians can do away with a little bit of thing, if they criticize. For example, Nupur, she quoted the Hadith. And you know what happened after that? Would you call that Nupur being free? Absolutely not. You can't criticize a religious god. You can't criticize a politician now. You can't. Everything is the same as what was under the UPA. But the fact is, it is still the same. It's not improved. And number two, it is also a matter of conjecture as to what, and I get this all the time and I'm tired explaining this. You don't have to wait for an apple to fall on your head to say gravity exists. You don't need to be from the same community to think well of that community. You don't need to be a dog to be a dog lover. For example, I know what is in the best interest of farmers, going by logic, going by the previous past precedents, going by how rich they can be if they adopt the farm laws.
Okay.
Now, those farm laws were taken back. That doesn't mean that Narendra Modi is on the ground. If he was from a particular community, he would think about that. Let's stop being patronizing. Let's think about what Indians want best for India.
Okay, well, we'll wrap this up at this juncture because fundamentally we've had a nice, engaging conversation, and I think we've made some smart observations that you can conclude